My husband looked at me and said, "You're overreacting. He's just a friend. Don't ruin this with your insecurities." I stayed quiet after that, not because I believed him, but because something inside me shut down. The kind of silence that doesn't come from trust, but from the slow realization that the person you married might already be standing on the other side of a line you never agreed to cross. The following weekend, he told me he was going out again. Same friend, same casual tone, same certainty that I wouldn't question him anymore. What he didn't expect was that night would end with him walking into a restaurant laughing with another woman and finding me sitting across the table from her husband. I'm 40 years old. I was married for 12 years to a man I thought I knew completely. His name is Mark. We met in our late 20s, fell in love fast, married fast, and built a life that, from the outside, looked steady. No kids. We tried for years. Doctors, conversations, quiet grief. Eventually, we made the decision together that it would just be the two of us, and I believed we were okay with that. We had routines, Friday movie nights, Sunday morning coffee walks, shared jokes that only made sense to us, a marriage that felt calm, predictable, safe. I thought that meant we were happy. About 3 months ago, Mark started mentioning a woman from his yoga class, Lauren. At first it sounded harmless, casual, almost boring. He told me about stretches she recommended, podcasts she liked, smoothies the group would grab after class. I didn't feel threatened. We weren't a jealous couple. I trusted him, completely. Until the mentions became constant. Until his phone started living face down on the table. Until he smiled at messages he didn't share anymore. Until he swiped his screen away the second I walked into a room. I didn't want to be that wife, the suspicious one, the controlling one. So I swallowed the discomfort and told myself I was imagining things. But that sentence, "Don't ruin this with your insecurities," kept echoing in my head. And by the time I walked into that restaurant with a stranger who turned out to be my mirror, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't insecure. I was being lied to. When I think back on my marriage now, what hurts the most isn't the betrayal itself. It's how reasonable everything looked while it was quietly falling apart. I met Mark when I was 28. I was working in project coordination at a mid-size logistics company, trying to prove myself in a role that required calm under pressure. He was a few years older than me, confident without being loud, the kind of man who made you feel steady just by standing next to him. We met through mutual friends at a casual gathering, nothing romantic or dramatic. We talked about work, travel, books we both pretended we had time to read. By the end of the night, I felt like I'd known him longer than a few hours. We moved quickly after that, not recklessly, at least not by our own standards. It felt intentional. We wanted the same things: stability, partnership, a quiet kind of happiness that didn't need constant excitement to survive. We got married less than 2 years later, surrounded by friends who said we made sense together. I believed that too. The first years of our marriage were fine. That's the word that keeps coming back to me. Not electric, not dramatic, just fine. We built routines that felt comforting. Friday nights were for movies on the couch. Sundays were for long walks and coffee, talking about nothing and everything. We laughed easily. We rarely fought. When we decided to try for a baby, it wasn't pressured. It felt like the natural next step. And when it didn't happen, month after month, then year after year, we faced it together. Doctor visits, conversations late at night, the quiet disappointment that never fully leaves, even when you stop talking about it. Eventually, we agreed that our life was still good without children, that it could still be full. I believe that decision bonded us, that it meant we chose each other again, consciously. Looking back, I see how much we coasted after that. We stopped checking in emotionally. We assumed being functional meant being connected. We shared a house, bills, routines, but fewer feelings. It wasn't bad enough to leave. It just wasn't nourishing either. Mark had always been social. He liked group activities, classes, environments where he felt admired. When he started yoga, I encouraged it. It was good for his back, he said. Good for stress. He came home relaxed, lighter. I was glad he'd found something that made him happy. That's when the name Lauren entered our life. At first, it was nothing. Lauren showed me this stretch. Lauren recommended this podcast. Lauren says this smoothie place is great. I barely registered it. He'd had female coworkers before, female friends. I'd never questioned that. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, Lauren stopped being just a name and started becoming a presence, a topic, someone who existed between us even when she wasn't physically there. And I didn't realize yet that my marriage wasn't being tested by temptation. It was being tested by honesty. The first thing that changed wasn't Mark's behavior toward me. It was his attention toward everything else. He started staying later after yoga, saying the group liked to grab smoothies or sit around talking. He said it casually, like it was no different from coworkers going for drinks after work. I nodded, told him that sounded nice. I didn't want to be the wife who questioned harmless socializing. But then his phone habits shifted. Mark used to leave his phone anywhere. On the counter, on the couch, screen up, notifications lighting the room. Now it was always face down, always within reach. When it buzzed, he'd glance at it quickly, smile faintly, and slip it into his pocket. If I walked into the room, his thumb moved instinctively, swiping away from whatever he was reading. I told myself I was reading into it. That marriage makes you hyper-aware sometimes. That boredom can masquerade as suspicion. Still, the name Lauren kept coming up. Lauren said this. Lauren tried that. Lauren thought this place was overrated. It was subtle, but frequent enough that I noticed the pattern before I noticed the threat. He spoke about her like someone whose opinion mattered. Someone whose presence lingered even when she wasn't around. I started feeling like I was sharing my husband's attention with a ghost. One night, we were sitting on the couch watching a show we'd already half seen before. Mark laughed at a joke I barely registered. His phone buzzed. He smiled again. The same smile, not the one he used with me anymore. A private one, reflexive. I watched him instead of the screen, my chest tightening for reasons I couldn't quite articulate. "Everything okay?" I asked lightly. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just a group chat." I didn't push. I didn't want to be suspicious without proof. But the air between us felt different, thinner, like something unspoken was pressing in from all sides. 2 weeks later, it happened. We were in bed, lights off, the room quiet except for the soft glow of his phone. It was 11 at night. He was lying on his side, typing, smiling to himself. I turned toward him, my voice calm, even though my heart had already started racing. "Who are you texting?" I asked. "Lauren," he said easily. Something in me braced. "Why are you texting another woman this late?" That's when he said it. "You're overreacting. He's just a friend. Don't ruin this with your insecurities." The words landed hard. Not because they were cruel, but because they dismissed something real. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't accused. I'd asked one question, and suddenly I was insecure. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I turned away and stared at the wall, my body stiff, my mind racing. He kept texting for another 20 minutes before setting his phone down and falling asleep like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep at all, because deep down I knew something had shifted. And I also knew that if I confronted him without certainty, he'd keep calling it insecurity. So I decided to start paying attention. The next morning, I moved through the house like everything was normal. I made coffee, I answered emails, I kissed Mark on the cheek before he left, the same way I had for years. But something inside me had shifted into a quiet, alert state. Not anger, not panic, awareness. I did what any wife who didn't want to be gaslit into silence would do. I started observing instead of reacting. That afternoon, while Mark was at work, I logged into our phone account. I told myself I was just checking out of curiosity, just to reassure myself that I was imagining things. The numbers loaded slowly, and with every second, my stomach tightened. Hundreds of texts. Hundreds. Over the past month alone. Calls too. Long ones. 40 minutes. An hour. Always during times he said he was running errands, or stuck late at work, or decompressing after yoga. Patterns emerged instantly, clear and undeniable. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to know how far this actually went. That Friday, Mark told me he had planned Saturday night. "Girls' night," he said casually. "Dinner and drinks with Emma and Jess." I nodded, smiled, told him to have fun. I could see the relief in his face, the way his shoulders loosened when I didn't question him. Saturday afternoon, I did something small but decisive. I called Emma. "Hey," I said lightly, "are you excited for tonight?" There was a pause on the other end, a long one. "Tonight? I'm not doing anything tonight. Is Mark saying we have plans?" My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. I laughed it off, told her I must have mixed up the days, and hung up quickly. My hands were shaking when I set my phone down. So he'd lied, cleanly, easily. I could have confronted him right then. I could have blown everything open in that moment. but something told me to wait, to see how far he would actually go. That night, Mark got ready in a way I hadn't seen in months. He dressed better, took time with his hair, put on cologne he rarely used anymore. When he kissed my cheek goodbye, it felt rehearsed. "Don't wait up," he said. I waited 5 minutes after he left. Then I grabbed my keys and followed him. He drove downtown to an upscale Italian restaurant, the kind we used to save for anniversaries. I watched him park, check his reflection in the rearview mirror, and walk inside with purpose. I sat in my car, heart pounding, telling myself I was about to do something that would change everything. 10 minutes passed. Then I saw him walk in, tall, fit, confident. That yoga instructor look, man bun, expensive athleisure. Derek. I felt sick, but I still didn't move. I needed proof I couldn't unsee. Through the window, I watched them get seated at a corner table, laughing, leaning in. At one point, Mark reached across the table and covered Derek's hand with his own. My vision blurred. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Is your husband Mark? Dark hair, about 6 feet, wearing a navy jacket?" My heart slammed against my ribs. I typed back, "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Vanessa," the message read. "I think our spouses are having dinner together right now. I'm Derek's wife." I nearly dropped my phone. I called immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" I asked. "Across the street," she said quietly. "You?" "Same," I replied. "Do you want to go inside?" There was a pause, then, "Yes." We met on the sidewalk without introductions. She looked tired, like she'd been crying for days. We walked in together. And that's when the lie finally ran out of places to hide. We didn't slow down when we entered the restaurant. Vanessa walked beside me, her posture stiff but determined, like if she stopped moving she might collapse. The hostess smiled automatically and asked if we had a reservation. I didn't answer her question directly. I just said, "We're meeting someone," and scanned the room. I saw them immediately. Corner table, candlelight, wine glasses half full. Mark's body angled in a way I hadn't seen in years, open and engaged. Derek leaning forward, smiling. Mark's hand resting over his, fingers curled like it belonged there. I didn't feel rage the way I'd imagined I might. What I felt was clarity, sharp, cold, undeniable. "There," I said quietly to Vanessa. We walked straight toward them. They didn't notice us until we were right next to the table. Mark looked up first. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might pass out. "Hey," I said calmly, my voice steadier than I felt. "Funny running into you here." For a split second, he just stared at me, mouth slightly open, eyes darting between my face and Vanessa's. Then Derek turned. The confusion on his face lasted less than a heartbeat before it transformed into pure panic. "Babe," Derek started, pushing his chair back slightly. "I can—" "Don't," Vanessa said, cutting him off. Her voice was shaking, but firm. "Just don't." Mark stood up halfway, then froze. "I can explain," he said, reaching for me instinctively, the way he used to when something went wrong. I pulled my arm back. I took the empty chair and sat down at their table. Vanessa did the same. The people at the table beside us had gone quiet. I could feel the attention, but I didn't care anymore. "Girls' night?" I asked Mark, tilting my head slightly. "With Emma and Jess?" His face crumpled. "I told you." "I called Emma," I said. "Yesterday. She had no idea what I was talking about." Derek tried to stand again. "Look, this isn't—" "Sit down," Vanessa said sharply. He sat. "How long?" she asked, looking directly at him. Silence. "How long?" she repeated, louder. Mark swallowed. His voice came out barely above a whisper. 2 months. Something inside me broke, and then immediately rebuilt itself stronger. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. 2 months, I repeated, and you called me insecure. Mark's eyes filled with tears. "It's not what you think," he said desperately. "It's exactly what I think," I replied. "You've been lying to me, sneaking around, making me feel crazy for noticing. And tonight you dressed up and came here like this was romantic while I was at home believing you." Tears streamed down his face. "Please," he said, "please don't do this here." "I'm done," I said quietly. I stood up. "I'll be staying at my brother's," I continued. "I want you out of the house by tomorrow. We're getting divorced." Vanessa stood too. Her hands were shaking now, but her voice didn't waver. "I'm pregnant," she said, looking at Derek. 10 weeks. I was going to tell you tonight." Derek's face went completely white. Mark covered his mouth with his hand. Vanessa slipped her wedding ring off and dropped it into Derek's water glass. It sank with a soft clink. "Don't come home," she said. We walked out together. I didn't look back. And for the first time since Mark had told me I was overreacting, I knew, without a doubt, that I hadn't imagined a single thing. The aftermath didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, each one heavier than the last. I stayed at my brother's place that night, sitting on the edge of his guest bed while he listened without interrupting, his jaw tight, his hands clenched together like he was holding back anger on my behalf. I didn't cry much. I felt hollow, like my body had gone into survival mode and shut off anything that might slow me down. Shock does that. It protects you until it can't anymore. By morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Calls, texts, voicemails, all from Mark. At first, the messages were frantic apologies. He said he was sorry. He said it meant nothing. He said he was confused, that he'd made a mistake, that he'd never meant to hurt me. He begged me to come home so we could talk like adults. I didn't respond. Then the tone changed. He accused me of humiliating him, of ambushing him, of bringing Vanessa into something that should have stayed private. He said I'd crossed a line by confronting him publicly, as if he hadn't been the one lying and sneaking around for months. I still didn't respond. 3 days after the restaurant, I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. I didn't hesitate. We had no children. Our finances were mostly separate. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want his money. I just wanted out. Cleanly. Quickly. When Mark found out, his messages escalated again. He said I was being cold, cruel, that I was throwing away 12 years over one mistake. I read those words once and felt something settle inside me. This wasn't remorse. This was panic over consequences. Meanwhile, Vanessa and I stayed in touch, not constantly, not emotionally entangled, just checking in. Two women bonded by the same lie, trying to steady ourselves in the wreckage. She was staying with her sister, seeing a therapist, taking care of herself and the life growing inside her. She told me she was keeping the baby, but Derek wouldn't be part of that picture. Derek apparently didn't take that well. Vanessa showed me screenshots a week later. Messages Derek had meant to send to Mark, but accidentally sent to her instead. They were panicking, strategizing, talking about letting things cool down, and figuring out how to make their relationship work after the fallout. Reading those messages was surreal. Two people who had destroyed their marriages, still clinging to the fantasy that they could rebuild something stable from betrayal. Then came another blow. Mark's parents called me. They were confused, upset, clearly blindsided. Mark had told them we were separating because I'd become controlling and paranoid. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult their son. I simply told them the truth. Calmly, clearly. I offered to show them phone records if they wanted proof. They didn't ask. His father apologized to me over and over. His mother cried, saying they hadn't raised him to behave this way. I felt bad for them. Truly. They were collateral damage in something they hadn't caused. A few days later, I heard through a mutual friend that Mark had been fired. Derek wasn't just someone from yoga. He was a client at Mark's company. Their relationship violated company policy, and after the restaurant incident spread through local social media, HR launched an investigation. Both of them were terminated. I won't pretend that didn't feel like karma. But even then, it didn't feel satisfying. It felt inevitable. Because lies don't just break trust. They collapse entire structures built on pretending. And I was standing in the middle of the wreckage, realizing there was still more to fall. The hardest part didn't happen at the restaurant. It didn't happen when I filed for divorce, or when I found out Mark had lost his job, or even when his parents called in tears. The hardest part came later, when everything went quiet. A week after I moved into my brother's guest room, the shock wore off. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation, the lawyer's office, the endless messages, finally drained out of my body. And what was left was exhaustion so deep it felt physical. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced I'd heard Mark's footsteps in the hallway. I'd reach for my phone instinctively, forgetting for a split second that my life no longer included checking in with him. The absence was loud. 12 years doesn't disappear cleanly. It leaves echoes everywhere. One afternoon, I sat alone in my brother's kitchen, staring at a mug of coffee that had gone cold. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt truly chosen in my marriage. Not tolerated, not accommodated, chosen. The thought hit me harder than any text or betrayal. I wasn't just grieving the man Mark turned out to be. I was grieving the woman I'd been while loving him. The one who'd dismissed her own discomfort. The one who'd prided herself on being low maintenance. The one who'd believed trust meant silence. I cried that day, quietly, fully. The kind of crying that comes when you finally stop holding yourself together for other people. My brother found me sitting on the floor, back against the cabinet, arms wrapped around my knees like I was trying to hold myself in one piece. He didn't say anything. He just sat down next to me and stayed. That was my lowest point. Not because I wanted Mark back, but because I finally understood how lonely I'd been long before the affair. Later that week, Mark left one final voicemail before my lawyer sent the cease and desist. His voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. Tired, defeated. "I never meant for this to happen," he said. "I just didn't know how to say I wasn't happy." That sentence stayed with me, not because it excused anything, but because it confirmed something I'd been avoiding. Our marriage hadn't ended because of one affair. It ended because we stopped being honest years ago. And that realization broke my heart in a way anger never could. But it also cleared something inside me, because if the truth could hurt this much, it meant I was finally done lying to myself. The shift didn't happen in a dramatic moment. There was no speech, no confrontation, no final message that wrapped everything up neatly. It happened quietly, on a Tuesday afternoon, in a therapist's office I hadn't expected to need. My brother had suggested therapy a few days earlier. I resisted at first, telling him I was fine, that I just needed time. He looked at me in a way that told me he didn't believe that for a second. "You don't have to be broken to ask for help," he said. "You just went through something that cracked your entire reality." So I went. The therapist asked me simple questions at first. How long had I been married? When did things start to feel off? What did I miss the most about my old life? I answered calmly, almost mechanically, until she asked one question that stopped me cold. "When was the last time you remember feeling truly happy in your marriage?" I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. I searched my memory, flipping through years like pages in a book I'd skimmed instead of read. I thought about our routines, our habits, our shared history, but happiness, real happiness, felt strangely distant. "Honestly," I finally said, my voice shaking, "I think it's been years." Saying it out loud changed something. I realized I'd been framing the affair as the destruction of a good marriage, when in reality, it was the exposure of a hollow one. That didn't make the betrayal less painful, but it made it clearer. The truth wasn't just that Mark cheated. It was that we'd both been living on autopilot, mistaking comfort for connection. Around that same time, Vanessa and I met for coffee. It was the first time we'd seen each other since the restaurant. She looked different. Still tired, but steadier. Grounded. She told me she'd had her first ultrasound. She was keeping the baby. Derek wouldn't be involved. She said it calmly, without bitterness. I admired her strength more than I could express. "I'm glad we walked in that night," she said quietly. "As awful as it was, at least we know the truth." So was I. That night, alone in my brother's guest room, I made a decision that felt heavier and lighter at the same time. I stopped wondering why Mark did what he did. I stopped replaying conversations, looking for alternative endings. I stopped hoping for remorse that would somehow make it hurt less. Instead, I chose myself. Not in an angry way, not in a dramatic, empowering montage way, just in a quiet, deliberate way that said, "I deserve honesty, I deserve partnership, I deserve peace." That was the moment I stopped feeling like a victim of what happened, and started feeling like the owner of what came next. By the time the divorce paperwork was moving through the system, the chaos around Mark had started to catch up with him in ways I didn't have to engineer. I stayed quiet. I followed my lawyer's advice. I didn't defend myself publicly or correct rumors unless someone asked me directly. And when they did, I told the truth without embellishment. That was enough. Word traveled fast once people stopped protecting him. Mutual friends reached out carefully at first, unsure whose side they were allowed to stand on. I didn't ask them to choose. I didn't badmouth him. I simply explained what happened when asked, and let the facts do the work I didn't need to do myself. Slowly, invitations to events stopped including his name. Conversations shifted. People began to see patterns they'd ignored before. His family pulled back too. Not dramatically, not cruelly, but with visible disappointment. They checked on me more than they checked on him. His mother sent a message saying she was sorry for the pain he caused and that she understood if I needed space. I appreciated the honesty. It made it easier to let go without anger. Mark, on the other hand, unraveled. After losing his job, he moved in with Derek for a while. I heard that arrangement didn't last long. Turns out building a relationship on secrecy doesn't magically transform into stability once the spotlight turns on. Their arguments became public. Friends stopped inviting them out together. The fantasy they'd built collapsed under the weight of real life. Vanessa's situation moved in the opposite direction. She leaned into support. Therapy, her sister, friends who showed up consistently. She sent me a photo from her second ultrasound with a short message. "I'm scared, but I'm okay." I told her I was proud of her, and I meant it. Watching her choose herself and her child, even when it meant starting over alone, reminded me that strength doesn't always look loud. As for me, I packed up my life quietly. I moved into a small apartment of my own. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful. I slept through the night for the first time in months. I stopped flinching at notifications. I stopped bracing for disappointment. I didn't celebrate the fallout. I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was settled, because I hadn't won anything. I had simply stepped out of a story that was never going to honor me. And without an audience or resistance, Mark's version of events lost momentum. The truth didn't need my voice anymore. It was standing on its own. 3 months after the restaurant, the divorce was finalized. No dramatic courtroom scenes, no last-minute pleas, just signatures, silence, and the quiet closing of a chapter I once believed would last my entire life. When the papers were done, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt lighter, like I'd been holding my breath for years without realizing it, and someone had finally opened a window. I moved into my own place a month earlier. It's small, modest, nothing I would have pictured for myself at 40 when I was still married. But it's mine. Every choice in it is intentional. The furniture, the quiet, the way the light comes in during the morning. I sleep better than I have in years, not because life is perfect, but because I'm no longer lying to myself to keep it intact. Mark tried to reach out once more through a mutual friend. He said he wanted closure. I declined. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Closure isn't something another person gives you when they're ready. It's something you claim when you stop needing their version of the story. From what I hear, Mark and Derek are still together. It doesn't sound happy. That doesn't bring me satisfaction. It brings confirmation. Relationships built on secrecy don't suddenly become healthy just because the truth is out. They carry the same cracks forward. Vanessa is doing well. She's halfway through her pregnancy now, glowing in that cautious, hopeful way that comes from choosing strength over denial. We still check in occasionally, not because we're bound by trauma, but because we witnessed each other's worst night and survived it. That kind of understanding doesn't disappear. I'm not dating. I'm not rushing to fill the space Mark left behind. For the first time in a long time, I'm comfortable being alone with myself. I've started hiking again, reconnecting with friends I drifted away from, sitting with discomfort instead of explaining it away. Looking back, the signs were always there. The late nights, the dismissive words, the way my intuition tried to speak before my fear told it to be quiet. I ignored it because I wanted peace. What I didn't realize was that real peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Trusting your gut doesn't make you insecure. Asking questions doesn't make you controlling. And walking away from betrayal doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. And for the first time in years, honesty feels like home.